I did it last night. What was it this morning? Anyway, okay, so we're talking about kids with problems. Kids have a lot of developmental problems, unhappy problems. One of them is intellectual disability. We used to call it mental retardation. We don't use that term anymore. And if you run across somebody that is using it, I had a colleague at Ashford that refused to change his nomenclature. He kept saying mentally retarded. We stopped. He was an adjunct, and we stopped giving him classes to teach because we couldn't get him to change his nomenclature. Anyway, so despite that, of course, intellectual disability we used to refer to as mental retardation. It's diagnosed when there is evidence that intellectual abilities are significantly below average. Important adaptive skills are also impaired, and usually both of them have to be there. Not only do they have a problem intellectually, but they also have a problem with life. The IQ score must be among the lowest, 2.5% of the population, and that is 70 or less. Now the reality is, and I don't know what kind of IQs you guys have, but the reality is that 2.5% of the population has intellectual disabilities. And the reality is that 2.5% of the population has extreme intellectual capabilities. How's that? So about 2.5% of the population are geniuses or have an IQ above 130. And then about 2.5% of the population has an IQ below 70, which is intellectual disability. So almost all of us are within these 60 points, between 70 and 130 IQ. So if you know anybody's IQ and it's somewhere between 70 and 130, they're okay. I think I told you I have a brother with an IQ of 160. He's really a pain in the ass. And I'm saying that on tape. So he is dumb as dirt. The guy is so stupid. Yeah. You know somebody like that too? It's really kind of tragic. He's never held down a job. What kind of a person can't hold down a job? He's got an IQ of 160, can't work. What the hell's wrong with this guy? You know, completely non-functional. He's got an IQ of 160. Level of adaptive functioning is assessed across 3 domains. We look at their academic capabilities, their social capabilities, and their practical capabilities. In other words, we look at whether they can get along in school, we look at whether they can get along in society, and we look at their street smarts. You think I'm kidding? My brother can't walk across the street. He's that stupid. He's so damn smart he can't walk across the street. Now how smart is that anyway? So he has no practical knowledge. His practical sense is just not there at all. He gets a job and he tries to tell people how to fix it. Everybody likes to be told that they're not doing things correctly. He knows a better way to do everything. He was in the army, and actually he was in Afghanistan for a tour, and he did fairly well. He did very well while he was over there, mainly because he was a quartermaster. And so he had to do with making sure that supplies got to where they were supposed to go. And he was actually really good at it. And he didn't insult anybody. And he got along with the locals. That was a trick. And the reason he got along with the locals, we're going to talk about religion, so close your ears if you're sensitive to this kind of information. They were all Muslim, of course, and they're very staunch Muslims. And of course, a lot of the guys that go over there are Christians. My brother's not. He's nothing. So when he went over there, he got along with them because he didn't try to preach to them. Christians are supposed to proselytize, which means they have to preach to people. And he didn't do that, and they liked that about him, and so he got along with everybody. So guess what happened next? The guy that took his place was evangelical. I know, how stupid is that? The guy that took his place was an evangelical Christian. And he alienated him in about, I don't know, about 30 seconds, I guess. So after that, yeah, he was getting along with everybody. Everybody was happy, and all of a sudden, IEDs started going off, and it was just horrible. There must be an adaptive dysfunction in at least one of these domains that results in failure to acquire normal milestones in personal independence and social responsibility. So we're looking at those three aspects on a continual basis. Once upon a time, we only looked at people for their academic capabilities. So we were only looking at their IQ, but now we look at all three of those aspects, whether they have street smarts, whether they can get along in any kind of that kind of a situation, whether they are functional as far as society is concerned, whether they can get along with people in society, and whether they can function in an academic situation. We look at their language and communication skills, their academic abilities, whether they can take care of themselves. And this is really quite important to people. They want to be able to take care of themselves. Whether they can manage money, which my wife doesn't think that I can do that, so evidently I'm as dumb as my brother. I can't manage money. If I've got it, I give it away. It's really kind of sad. I'm broke right now. I'm going to be broke until payday because my wife won't let me have any money. And there's social judgment. I don't know. How's my social judgment? Am I doing okay socially? I can't manage money, okay? But I don't need it. She pays for everything. What do I have to worry about? The deficit in adaptive function must be evident in multiple environments and require ongoing support by others. These individuals, of course, a lot of times they are taking care of their parents for an extended length of time, and then they go into a care facility. Deficits that require ongoing support must also be present in at least one area of adaptive daily functioning across multiple environments. So, are they able to get along socially in an academic situation? Can they get along at school? Can they get along with people in a social situation? You know, the number of environments. And this is actually the way we look at ADHD as well. When we look at ADHD, we don't just look at how are they acting at home. We're also looking at how are they acting at school and how are they acting in a social situation. So potentially you would look at how they act at home, how they act at school, and how they act at church if they go to church. That would be the criteria. So if they are only acting out in church, then potentially maybe they just don't want to go to church and they actually don't have ADHD. So you're going to throw pills at a kid that can't get along, that keeps screaming in church, or somebody that acts out at home but is okay at school. My grandson is Mr. Perfect, but when he's at school, he will eat whatever they feed him. So if they feed him broccoli at school, he eats it raw. He'll eat broccoli raw. I know, what's wrong with this kid? If he's with his friends, he will eat anything. But when he's at home, he's a picky eater. He only eats this, that, or the other. He'll eat tacos at school on Taco Tuesday. Isn't Tuesday always Taco Tuesday? Okay. He'll eat tacos at school, but at home he'll only eat dinosaur tacos. Do you know what a dinosaur taco is? Just meat and cheese, nothing else. It's a dinosaur taco. I don't know what one thing has to do. I know that's really kind of weird. So socially, of course, he's one way, and at home he's another completely different way. Intellectual disability can be specified as mild, moderate, severe, or profound. The DSM-4 determined the qualifications for this by looking at the IQ scores. We don't do that anymore. We look at how functional this individual is. And that's how we do it. How adaptive are these individuals? That's the way the DSM-5 looks at things. In the old days, it was just by IQ score. So, you know, you lived and died by your IQ score, but not anymore. The incidence of intellectual disorder may be 1% of the population, with males diagnosed more often than females. So males have an intellectual deficit far more readily than females do. Individuals with IQs less than 65, 2 standard deviations below the mean, who show significant impairment in adaptive functioning, meet the criteria for intellectual disability. So sometimes we say 65, sometimes we say 70. It was 70 in the DSM-4. Now, of course, we are looking at how functional this individual is. Individuals who score between 70 and 85 may meet the definition for borderline intellectual functioning. And of course, sometimes we'll diagnose them with that, especially if they are having adaptive problems. Despite the fact that they have an IQ score that is high enough for them not to have a disability, if they are having problems socially or problems practically, then potentially we will diagnose them with borderline intellectual functioning. And of course, there is the bell curve again. As you can see, we have the same number of geniuses as we have individuals suffering from intellectual disability. It is a perfect bell curve. The majority, perhaps 85% of those with intellectual disability have a mild intellectual disability. These individuals very frequently can live by themselves without any problems, which is good. 85% of the individuals with a problem, with an intellectual problem, are still relatively functional. Their subnormal intelligence becomes apparent during the school years, and they tend to fall behind their age group. And of course they're held back because they can't pass whatever. With persistence, they can learn academic skills roughly comparable to a 6th grade level by their late teens. So by the time they should be graduating from high school, they will have an intellectual level of about the 6th grade. With extended education and assistance, independence in several areas can be achieved, but ongoing support is usually needed. These individuals may live in a halfway house, they may live in a group home situation, but they're perfectly functional, and they usually can work at repetitive jobs, as exciting as repetitive jobs are. About 10% of the people with intellectual disability have a moderate intellectual disability. They usually learn to talk during the preschool years, but later and more slowly than other people. And so it's fairly obvious that these individuals have a problem. They're likely to show impairments in sensory motor development. Their academic abilities are markedly low, and their social skills are likely to be limited. They can't get along with people. What was I talking about? Oh, I was talking about people with Asperger's syndrome. Half of you guys have already heard these stories, but I'm going to tell it again. My son is in a master's program for mathematics, and it's one of those, you know, he takes classes and I don't even understand what the title of the class is. I mean, it's that bad. It's not just calculus, it's, you know, experimental statistical analysis of, something bizarre. I don't know. Anyway, I don't understand what he's talking about. So the people teaching these classes, you can imagine how interesting they are. A lot of these individuals, they really know math really well, but they have no social skills whatsoever. I mean, none. Absolutely none. So they were having a graduation party for the people that are graduating out of the program, and there are 6 faculty members, and of the 6 faculty members, 4 of them could not make eye contact when they talked. So they would talk to you, but they couldn't make eye contact with you. So that left 2 of the individuals. There was only 1 individual that could make eye contact. The other guy took his computer up there, and he put it up there, and he hid behind his computer. My son looked at his computer. It wasn't even turned on. He was just hiding behind his computer. That's how bad it might be. So these guys are all math people. I swear they've all got Asperger's syndrome. And some of the individuals that have just graduated from the program, brilliant people, but one of them will just blurt out anything. Anything. I mean, she is so inappropriate. She'll say, "Oh, did you fart?" You know, that kind of thing. "Oh, you got a booger hanging out of your nose. You want to pick it? Here's a Kleenex." Who does that? You know. And the other guy talks so loud. I mean, he just talks loud. So fairly inappropriate. Anyway, so I'm not saying they have intellectual deficits, but they have their social skills are limited to some extent. And the professors obviously have Asperger's syndrome. It's fairly obvious they have Asperger's syndrome. But we're going to talk about some of these individuals in just a second. As adults, they can contribute to their own support in protected environments, and that's usually a group home or a halfway house of one kind or another. About 3.5% of those with intellectual disability have severe intellectual disability. Impaired development is apparent in infancy or early childhood in the form of poor motor development, minimal speech, and often the presence of physical deformities. So these individuals, we see these individuals with deformities. Many can learn to talk in simple words and phrases and learn elementary health and grooming habits, but that's about it. As adults, they may learn to perform certain routine tasks, but generally require complete supervision and economic support, which leaves us with the last kind, with the last group. The individuals with profound intellectual disability represent about 1.5% of the population of individuals with intellectual disability. They have extreme deficits in both intellectual and sensory motor functions, and this is apparent from birth. Most of these individuals have severe deformities, physical deformities. Usually total care is required for the rest of their lives. If they learn something, they will learn it from a select individual. If that individual goes away, if that individual is no longer there, they have to relearn everything. So it is, I know, it's really kind of odd. I had a cousin that was working at the Indiana group home well, back then it was called mental retardation, but now we call it intellectual disability. She was taking care of this individual. She was supposed to go to medical school. This is how stupid people in my family are. Are you ready for this? Okay. I already told you about my brother. This is my cousin. She was going to medical school the next summer. And so as training for to go to medical school, she worked at this group home. And she ran into this kid that was profoundly intellectually disabled. And so she worked with him all through the summer, and evidently he made advances that he had never made before. So it came time for her to go home. It came time for her to go to school. Guess what happened next? She stayed, of course. Instead of going to medical school and becoming a functional individual, no, she stays there and she takes care of this kid. Well, all the kids that were at this school were wards of the state of Indiana. So there was nobody that was in charge of them. And so she signed off to be the ward for this kid. And she never went to medical school. What a waste. What an amazing waste. So she sacrificed her life to take care of this kid that wasn't even her kid. But she had just fallen in love. I don't know what the word you need to use. Anyway, eventually he died, of course, because he had all these severe physical deformities. One time he had a crisis. He was paralyzed, and he was curled up in a ball. And he had so they had to give him a stool softener in order for the food to move through his body. And he got a blockage, and they had to take him to the Mayo Clinic up in Rochester, Minnesota. This is from Manchester, Indiana. They had to take him up to Rochester. Anyway, guess what the girl does now? She takes care of her mother. Her mother's like 98 years old. She never went to medical school. She could have helped all those people. Instead, she helped this one child with profound intellectual disability. And her 98-year-old mother. That's it. Anyway, there you go. Usually told her before. Okay. My cousin. She went to Vassar. Biological influences that may cause intellectual disability, heredity, you may have a hereditary problem, alterations of embryological development, something may have happened to you in the womb, pregnancy or perinatal problems, Your mother may have done something while you were in the womb, or you may have contracted some kind of strange disease and acquired the medical condition. Environmental influences, growing up in an environment with little stimulation. There are two different types of intellectual disability. One is caused by natural causes, and the other one has to do with an unstimulating environment. And we see this type of intellectual disability a lot, especially in poorer areas or in poorer countries. There is just no stimulation for these individuals, and if you don't have to think, then you won't think. We were worried for a while that watching too much television would do this to you. It would make your brain not develop properly. But now we know that that's not true. I mean, I guess you could watch SpongeBob SquarePants all day long. People binge watch a lot of different things on television. I don't know if you could binge watch something that would make your brain into pablum, but it hasn't happened yet. We're also worried about video games. Is that what is happening with these individuals? One of the things we've noticed with individuals who play a lot of video games is their eye-hand coordination is exceptional. So most of the individuals that are flying the attack drones for the United States Air Force, most of these guys are video game wackos. Yeah, and they're good. They're really good. So without those video games, we wouldn't have the drone strikes that we have, I guess, to this day. Anyway, so a lot of different things have happened, but you need some kind of stimulation in your home. Once upon a time, I was trying to decide between marrying two different women. Yeah, what's the probability? Two women in the world would agree that they might want to marry me. I know, it was very, very odd. But one of the individuals, when I went to her house, she had books, she had records. This is back when we had records. She had all this stuff, and we had these stimulating conversations. The other individual was a little bit more attractive, and her physical attributes were exceptional. But you go to her house, and guess what she had in her house? People magazine. That was it. That's all she had was People magazine. So I decided, so that I could have intellectual stimulating conversation, I would marry the individual with all the records in it. What do you think? Good choice, bad choice?
Did you get divorced with her?
I'm sorry?
Did you get divorced with her?
No, I'm still married to her.
Oh, okay.
What do you think? Good idea, good choice or bad choice? Go with the lady with the physical attribute, the extreme physical attributes, or the lady with the intellectual stimulating conversations?
Huh?
I know you don't think about these things. Yeah. When you're a horny 28-year-old, you're kind of dumb as dirt. But luckily, I made the right choice. What do you think, Travis? Did I make the right choice? Thank you. I know. At least I can hold a conversation with this thing. No specific causal factors are identified in 30% to 40% of cases of intellectual disability. We have no idea why they have this problem. It isn't hereditary. They didn't contract any illnesses. There weren't any problems during pregnancy, either with the child or with the mother. She wasn't drinking alcohol. She wasn't shooting up with heroin. In 30 to 40% of the cases, we can't figure out what the problem is. They're just there. We know that they're there. So reasons for intellectual disability, one of them is PKU. Once upon a time, over half of the individuals with any type of intellectual disability was due to a mutation of their protein, the waste product from protein metabolism. It was known as PKU, phenylketonuria. Phenylketonuria is a problem that we see where they are trying to metabolize phenylalanine. Phenylalanine, of course, is a waste product for protein metabolism. Okay, and that's phenylketonuria. Now every baby that's born in the hospital is checked for PKU, and for that reason we've cut this almost down to zero. If somebody has this mutation, we can put them on a low phenylalanine diet, and these individuals will have no brain damage whatsoever. PKU is a waste product, and because it's a waste product, it kills brain cells. So after they eat their first meal of protein, after they've had their first drink of milk, this baby, we will check them to find out if they have an excess amount of PKU, phenylketonuria. And it happens before they leave the hospital. And this is one of the reasons why your baby came home with, if you have a baby, your baby came home with Band-Aids on its heels. And that was necessary. We needed to do that. Because if they are PKU positive, then we need to put them on a special diet. And we can keep them from having any intellectual disability at all by putting them on this special diet where they don't eat any proteins, as odd as that may seem. Anyway, so we've saved all these babies' lives. Once upon a time, this was the #1 cause of of intellectual disability in the United States. One thing that we really can't check for unless we do genetic studies is Fragile X syndrome. It's where there is a nearly separated segment of the long arm of the X chromosome. And as you can see, there's a chunk here that looks like it's about to break off. That's known as Fragile X, and sometimes it does break off. If it does break off, then we got a problem because the intellectual disability will be severe. But as long as that stays intact, we will have an individual that looks, facially they look all the same. It's really the most bizarre thing in the world. They all look alike. But as long as this stays intact, of course, their intellectual disability won't be as severe. If that breaks off, then we got a problem. It's due to a mutation of the FMR1 gene site. It's the most common heritable condition associated with intellectual disability. We can detect it through blood tests or amniocentesis. So we can draw blood. Usually we draw blood from we get amniotic fluid and we look at the amniotic fluid. But after the baby is born, we can, of course, draw their blood and do genetic studies to see if we can find a fragment of the X, Fragile X. Males are disproportionately affected by this condition because they carry only one X chromosome. If it's a female, of course, she has 2 X chromosomes, so one can cancel the other one out. The problem is, of course, with Fragile X is that, the problem with Fragile X, if it's a female, then she will have a greater intellectual deficit than the male will. So this is really kind of an interesting problem. They have all kinds of interesting physical anomalies. If it's a male, he will have distended testicles. He will have long fingers. His face will be elongated. He will have the distance between his lip, his upper lip, and his nose is very short. They all look the same. It's really kind of bizarre. I think I told you this story, but once upon a time I went into the newborn nursery and I smelled pancakes. And of course, you're not supposed to have food in the nursery. And I was, I'm walking around and I'm drawing blood from all the babies that I was supposed to draw blood from. And this nurse came by that I normally teased a little bit. And I said, I smell pancakes. You guys eating pancakes? Lady hit the ceiling. I'll tell you what, I thought she was going to throw me physically out the door. Bumping my head on the door frame as she threw me out the door. She was pissed. And she said, that you're the third person that's come in here and said that you think we're eating pancakes in here. Of course we're not eating any pancakes. We never do anything like that. Well, what happened was, and of course then I drew the blood from the baby that was actually the problem, and it smelled like maple syrup. That's what I was smelling. I was smelling maple syrup. I wasn't really smelling pancakes. It smelled like maple syrup, and that's this problem called galactosemia. And so I told her, hey, come over here, this baby smells really strong like maple syrup, and of course that's maple syrup disease. I knew it, of course. This wasn't the first time I'd ever seen this stuff before, but she was about ready to kill me. So I let her take the credit for finding this kid. the galactosemia, because this can cause all kinds of interesting intellectual deficits. We caught it early enough so that we could treat the child, and it didn't have any problems, of course. And she got an award or something. I can't remember. Damn it! Never did anything. Almost got punched by a nurse. Nothing worse than getting punched by a nurse. Of course, I'm shorter than most nurses. That doesn't seem to be fair. Anyway, okay, so galactosemia is one of them, maple syrup urinary disease. It really does smell like maple syrup. It smells like pancakes. It's really kind of bizarre, especially when it's a fresh urine. So it smells warm. You can smell that it's the most bizarre thing in the world. Anyway, galactosemia. Another one is Tay-Sachs disease. Tay-Sachs disease is a neurological problem. The individual has a neurological degeneration, which will last for an extended length of time. These babies rarely live beyond 2 years, and in those 2 years they will lose functioning. They'll go blind, they will become paralyzed, and eventually, of course, they will die. It is a disease of primarily individuals of the Jewish faith. Not all Jewish people have this gene. The individuals that are what we refer to as Ashkenazi Jews are more likely to have it. Those are Eastern European Jews. There are 3 different groups of Jewish people. The Jewish people, I don't know if you understand the story of what happened to these guys, but they all used to live in Israel. They were conquered and they were spread all over the world. Some of them went to Egypt and some of them just left. Anyway, they were all kicked out of Israel. Eventually, there were 3 major diasporas. One group stayed in Israel or came back to Israel. One group went up to Spain, and the other group went into Eastern Europe. And the ones that went into Spain were referred to as Sephardic Jewish people, and the ones that went into Eastern Europe were called Ashkenazi. And then the ones that stayed in Israel were called something else. I can't remember what they were called. Anyway, the Tay-Sachs disease is a genetic problem that people that are Ashkenazis have this problem, and it takes both of them have to have the mutation for it to take effect, and of course, eventually they die. Unfortunately, as ugly as that is. There's nothing you can do about it. With galactosemia, you can put them on a special diet, and things will get better. But if it's Tay-Sachs disease, there's nothing you can do. Tuberous sclerosis, or epiloia, is the most widely known dominant inherited condition. It's caused by tuberous calcifications in the brain. It produces intellectual disability and epilepsy. How do we diagnose it? We diagnose it with the skin rash. And this is known as tuberous sclerosis. As you can see, it's a rash on their cheeks. Oops. Down syndrome is associated with intellectual impairment as well as a wide variety of physical anomalies. Down syndrome occurs once in about every 700 births. And the risk is strongly linked to maternal age. It's known as trisomy 21 because this individual will have 3 chromosomes on the 21st pair. It's more common in women that are older. Women are born with all the eggs that they will ever have. Men, of course, produce new reproductive structures every second. But women, of course, are born with all of the eggs that they will ever have. As they get older, of course, the eggs get older with them. And if they are, sometimes the genetic material in the eggs will degenerate. And that's what we see with individuals who suffer from or who give birth to individuals with Down syndrome. The probability as a 20-year-old of having a baby with Down syndrome is 1 in 2,000. But for women over the age of 45, very dangerous for them to have babies. It's 1 in 25 rather than 1 in 2,000. So as you can see, it's a lot more dangerous. My daughter got pregnant at 43, and we were kind of scared. We were pretty scared. The 2 of us were pretty scared. I don't know if the baby daddy was scared because he's a sperm donor pretty much. Anyway, my daughter and I, of course, she's a biology teacher. I'm a psychology professor. We both knew exactly what the dangers were. So we watched the pregnancy very closely. Both of us did, and every time she made it through a week, she'd call me up and say, "Dad, I feel great. You know, I've had morning sickness all week. You know, that kind of stuff." And then once she made it past the 22nd week, you know, we both celebrated. She had all of the tests done, all of the genetic tests. She had an amniocentesis done. She had a alpha theta protein done to make sure there was no problem with the pregnancy. Looked like everything was great. Everything was fantastic. She went to term and had the baby at age 43. And let me show you a picture of him. Mr. Perfect. Wait a second. Let me see if I can find a picture of Mr. Perfect. Anyway, unfortunately, we both had all this information. There he is. There's Mr. Perfect with all of his soccer gear. That's his gloves, and these are shin guards, and there's his shoes, and there's his socks. Mr. Perfect. 5 years old and brilliant. He's a brilliant child. Looks like his uncle Chris. So we're all really happy with him. I spent the weekend with my wife while my daughter was in training in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Anyway, they played cards. There's a new game, some kind of Snapjack? Slapjack? No, this is Snapjack. It's a mixture of the two, Snapdragon and Slapjack. I don't know. Anyway, they played Slapjack. I have no idea. He played hockey. She got to be the coach while he played. He was playing with the dog, and the dog stole the puck. So I guess the dog won the hockey game. Anyway, I always play hockey with him when I'm at home. The leading cause of preventable intellectual disability is the effect of maternal alcohol consumption on the developing embryo. While my daughter was pregnant, there were a lot of things that she didn't do. One of them was she didn't drink, certainly. The other was she didn't drink any caffeine, which was kind of interesting. I found it kind of curious, but she was trying to make sure that this baby would turn out okay. Because it was her only shot, 43, she's probably not going to get pregnant again. And she hasn't. She's almost 50 now, and is that right? Well, she's 48, I guess. Anyway, fetal alcohol syndrome produces characteristic biological and psychological impairments, including mild to moderate intellectual disability. So fetal alcohol syndrome, kind of a serious situation. Behavioral ramifications of fetal alcohol syndrome would be diagnosed as neurodevelopmental disorder associated with prenatal alcohol exposure. Which is something that, and as I've told you before, I have a niece that gave birth to a heroin-addicted baby. I know, it's not right. It's an embarrassment to the family. I haven't seen her since she gave birth, but I'm thinking I'll punch her the first time I see her. Dumb thing. She also smoked during her pregnancy. I have seen the baby, but I haven't seen her. Baby seems okay. It took him 6 weeks to get the baby off of heroin. That was a struggle, but he seems to be okay. Harmful biological influences that have been either directly or indirectly associated with intellectual disability. Poor maternal health, including acute and chronic maternal infections. And of course, the more infections she has, the more likely the baby will be affected by those infections. Maternal fetal blood incompatibility, this is also known as Rh disease. If you know what your blood type is, it's either O positive, or it's either a positive or a negative. If it's Rh negative, then you have the possibility of developing antibodies against a baby with positive blood. So when my kids were born, my wife was A negative. She was A negative, and both of my children were positive. They're both O positive. I'm O positive, so they're O positive. Well, they could have been anything. They could have been A positive for that matter. So the possibility is, if there was a contamination of the baby's blood in my wife's system, that she would have developed antibodies against Rh positive blood. So there's always a possibility that the next time, it wouldn't have affected the first baby that was born. It would have affected the second baby that was born, because she would already have those antibodies in her system. So what they did when my daughter was born was they gave her a shot of what they call Rogam. Rogam is a very weak form of Rh positive, which makes her, she will develop very weak antibodies against the baby's blood. So when my son was born, potentially he could have been born with her blood trying to kill his blood. That could have happened. And that's known as, what is that called? Hemolytic disease of the newborn. Her blood cells would have destroyed all of his cells, and so they would have been born anemic. He would have been born anemic, and of course that didn't happen. This used to be fairly common before they developed Rogam, but now everything is much better. We see this very rarely. Anoxia is where the baby has its oxygen cut off for a period of time. You can go without oxygen in your brain for about 3 minutes before the brain cells start to become destroyed. You've got about 10 minutes to stay alive. So if the umbilical cord is squeezed off, that's where the baby gets its oxygen. If there's a problem and it gets squeezed off during the birthing process, then the baby can suffer from anoxia. If the baby doesn't breathe right away, they can suffer from anoxia. If the mother came in contact with radiation, if she took drugs, of course, like my great niece did, or if the baby is born premature, then we can have potential problems. There are other things out there that will cause problems. If the mother comes in contact with measles during her pregnancy, the baby can be born blind. The baby can be born with intellectual deficits, with intellectual disabilities. Strangely enough, if the family has a cat, then the mother, if she has anything to do with the cat's feces or with the cat's urine, then she can contract toxoplasmosis. And this is how you get toxoplasmosis. So one of the things that pregnant women are supposed to stay away from is the cat litter, if they have a cat in the house. They get it from all kinds of interesting places. They get it from mice. They can get it from any raw meat that they eat, especially raw lamb, as odd as that may seem. So toxoplasmosis can be a problem. Syphilis, of course, so you get toxoplasmosis from your cat. Syphilis, of course, is a sexually transmitted infection. Cytomegalovirus is a low-level infection that is all over the place. I mean, it's just all over the place. But if the mother contracts it during her pregnancy, then potentially it can get into the baby, and it can cause all kinds of interesting problems, poor brain growth. The baby can be born blind. It can be born deaf with cytomegalovirus. So it's something that we don't ever worry about unless somebody's pregnant, the cytomegalovirus. Also toxoplasmosis. People get toxoplasmosis infections all the time. Doesn't affect them hardly at all. You don't even know it. Maybe you got the sniffles or something. I mean, it's really not that big a deal. Unless you're pregnant. Then you need to stay away from the damn cat. All right. Or shoot the cat. I got a cat. She hates me for some reason. I haven't quite figured that one out yet. You know, you can pet a cat and they'll purr. Pet a cat and they'll purr. This cat, you pet it twice, starts purring, and then it scratches you. That's what a horrible cat this one is. She's just a monster. She keeps bringing animals in the house alive, and then she wants to play with them. So she'll take it over to the couch and let it escape under the couch. Then she runs from one end to the other trying to catch the mouse. I know. There's a funny smell in my house. Preterm delivery, usually these individuals will be of low birth weight. As you can see, this is a preterm baby, weighs maybe 2 pounds. You can see the hand is so much bigger than the baby's hand. Premature infants have greater health risks in many areas and are at increased risk for intellectual disability and other developmental disorders. My niece, not the niece that was addicted to heroin, but I have a niece that had triplets. She was artificially inseminated. She had triplets. 2 of the babies turned out just perfect, and then the last baby, the third one, evidently it wasn't getting very much food, and it wasn't being fed very well. So she had 2 babies that weighed right in the 4 to 5 pound range, and the other one weighed about 2.5 pounds. I know, which didn't seem fair at all if you think about it. She has all kinds of interesting problems as compared to the other 2. They're all perfect, you know, all 3 of them are perfect. One's taller than the others. But the one that was premature had breathing problems for the first 1.5 years of its life. The other 2, no problems whatsoever. She's got psoriasis. She's got a skin condition, whereas the other 2 don't have any problems at all. She's got asthma, where the other 2 have nothing, no problems at all. Anyway, so prematurity, of course, can cause a lot of interesting problems. Medical interventions have significantly improved the survival ability of premature infants, but they remain at high risk for cognitive impairment, sensory impairment, and various conditions of the central nervous system. The basic problem is that they can't breathe yet when they're born, when they're premature. So you have to put them in an oxygen-rich environment, and sometimes that can cause problems if you're not careful. So you have to monitor them constantly while they are in the incubators to make sure that they're not getting too much oxygen or whatever. Anyway, cretinism is stunted physical and mental development caused by impaired functioning of the thyroid gland, one cause of which is an iodine deficient diet. Intellectual disability, usually severe, is accompanied by certain characteristic physical features, including stunted growth, dry skin, coarse hair, and a large head. So one of the things we do when a baby is born is we check the thyroid to make sure that they're not hypothyroid. If they are hypothyroid, we need to put them on special medication so that they will get an adequate amount of thyroxine, and that will allow them their brains to develop normally. Once upon a time before we figured out what iodine was, we couldn't figure out why all these people had goiters in the middle of the country. People living in Indiana and Ohio and West Virginia, Kentucky, they weren't getting any seafood. And since they weren't getting any seafood, they weren't getting any iodine. It wasn't until the 1920s we figured out, oh, wait a minute, if we give these guys iodine, then their goiters will go away. Well, the problem was that we had all these women giving birth to babies, and potentially if they weren't eating the right foods or not getting any iodine, the baby would be born with cretinism. And of course we saw this over and over and over again. Finally in the 1920s we figured it out. So we started putting iodine in salt. So people that live in Indiana, people that live in Illinois, people that live away from the ocean where you don't get any iodine and there's no iodine in the local salt, we had to start putting iodine in the salt. So that's Morton salt, is iodized salt. I suggest to you that unless you eat a lot of seafood, that you go ahead and get the iodized salt. It can't hurt you, and it can only help you. So there you go, iodized salt. Okay, this was a really stupid problem that we had. Several medical conditions can lead to intellectual disability. Encephalitis and meningitis, of course, are infections of the brain. Head trauma, brain tumors, and epilepsy are other problems. Shaken baby syndrome, where the neck is not really broken, but it causes a lot of problems. The movement of the brain inside the skull destroys brain cells and causes traumatic brain injury. Lead poisoning, of course, and hydrocephaly. Hydrocephaly Hydro means water, and cephaly means head. These individuals will accumulate excess amounts of fluid in their brains, and because of that, because they have excess amounts of fluid, the brain cells can't develop properly, so these individuals have an intellectual disability. Well, we won't talk about old jokes. Anyway, they used to talk about waterheads and whatnot. Of course, that was a very cruel joke, and we don't tell those jokes anymore. Anyway, hydrocephaly, this is what it looks like. This is what a healthy infant looks like. But as you can see, the hydrocephalic child has an enlarged head, and a lot of that has to do with the excess fluid that they have on their brains. And of course, with the excess fluid, the brain cells can't grow properly. Hydrocephalic. Psychological and social factors can produce deficits in intelligence. Extreme deprivation and isolation can cause problems. This is one of the reasons that we're so worried about. We found, 3 different groups of children in the United States over the last year that were being imprisoned by their parents and not fed very well and not given any intellectual stimulation. Their growth has been stunted. And potentially, of course, without food, if you don't eat proper food, your brain can't develop either. So some of these families, and this one family had 11 kids, and they weren't feeding these guys. It's happened 3 different times. That one lady drove off the cliff. She got drunk and drove off the cliff, and they were fastened in their seat belts, and the mother and father didn't die, but all the kids died because they didn't have their seat belts on. How stupid is this? I know. So these kinds of things, I don't know who these people are. I mean, why wouldn't you want your children? Why wouldn't you want to feed them? I don't understand. That one group out in California, seems to happen in California a lot. I don't know, this is nuts. Anyway, so they're not getting they're not getting proper food, they're not getting proper stimulation. Quality of prenatal care is, they had that one girl that they chained to the bathroom, in the bathroom, and all she could do was go to the bathroom. They didn't let her out of the bathroom. Oh, jeez, who does that to people? IQ change in identical twin boys rescued at age 7 from abuse. After 6 years of environmental enrichment and therapy, their IQs rose to normal range, and this was in 1976. So all you need to do is start feeding them and stimulating them, and of course potentially they will regain to the level that they regain the intellectual capacity that they should have had otherwise. It is important to act to control as many of the conditions that cause intellectual disability as possible. Family planning should include consideration of maternal age. In other words, 50-year-olds shouldn't try to get pregnant, probably. If you're gonna wait to have a baby, don't.
Back there.
My son is, I keep trying to, I want grandkids, so I keep hoping my son will get somebody pregnant. He's engaged, he's been engaged for 5 years to this girl. He's 46, he's 46. And she's 30, I think she just turned 30. I don't know how he ever got it. Anyway. But she may not care, but I'm keeping time, she may not care about her biological clock, but I do, because I want another grandkid. I'm glad she's so young. I don't know, she's just started an educational program. She's trying to get her bachelor's degree in political science. I don't know. I was hoping she'd just get knocked up. I want grandkids. I don't care. What do I care? I just want babies. They're on the phone. I only have one. I know. So he's the baby, and he'll be the baby until there's another baby to take his place. He's going to be the baby until he's like 28 years old. hope my son decides to have a baby. But he's a mathematician, so he does everything, you know, and the way he's supposed to do everything. Everything has to add up. He doesn't have enough money to have a baby yet, so I'm hoping that he gets a good job. I don't know. I want a grandkid. I don't care about their problems. What do I care? Right? I just want a grandkid. I want somebody to play with. He's no fun anymore. He's 46 years old. How much fun is that? He's just boring as hell. You know, adults are boring. No offense, Chris. Okay, so you need family planning. Okay, during pregnancy, the fetus must be properly nourished, while exposure to alcohol or other toxins has to be eliminated. And of course, this is what my daughter did. She made sure that she didn't drink any caffeine, even any caffeine. She didn't want the kid to have any problems whatsoever. She stopped drinking alcohol. Maternal health should be monitored and infections should be avoided. After birth, an enriched and stimulating environment is important, both in school and at home. We started reading to this kid in the womb, literally in the womb, after he was born. The kid can't even understand what the hell we're saying, and here we are, we're reading him all these books. Intellectual stimulation. We had mobiles over his bed. We played him Mozart. I'm not a real fan of Mozart, but we played him classical music. He likes rap music now. He's a 5-year-old and he likes rap music. Enrichment programs target perceptual, motor, cognitive, language, and social emotional development. Early intervention programs have demonstrated their effectiveness in reducing the risk of cultural, familial, intellectual disability, and we see these in schools. What's the program? What is the program? What am I thinking of? What's the early Head Start? Head Start. Thank you. Yeah, Head Start. I think you said Head Start.
Early childhood or
Head Start. Head Start, wonderful program. And this is for areas with people with low socioeconomic status. One of the things we discovered was the more stimulation we can give them at a young age, the more likely that they are not going to have any problem with intellectual disability. We found that these kids this is accelerating. Head Start is a wonderful, wonderful program. It's probably the best program we've ever come up with in the United States. It was started by the guy that started the war in Vietnam, Johnson. Lyndon Johnson started the Head Start program in 1965. Wonderful program. It has really added to the intellectual capabilities of people in the United States. It was so successful, all these poor kids were doing so well in school that the rich kids, the rich parents decided that they would sue the federal government to get them to start Head Start in their areas as well. So now anybody can go to Head Start. In the beginning it was just for the children in the poorer areas, but now there it is, Head Start. Special education programs, of course, within schools for individuals with intellectual disabilities. For more severe cases, treatment occurs within residential living facilities, treatment facilities, or institutions to support such persons. Structured behavior modification is very useful in training important skills such as self-care, language, daily living abilities, and prevention of self-injury. Comprehensive review of behavioral interventions for self-injury involving mostly persons with severe or profound intellectual disability found both reinforcement and punishment-based techniques to be effective, but especially we like to try to force them and not punish them. It gives them a negative attitude, so we try to use reinforcement whenever possible. There are no medications that treat intellectual disability. It would be nice if we could give you a pill or an elixir that you could drink and make you smarter, but it doesn't work that way. There's nothing we can do. Although there are a variety of antipsychotic, sedative, and tranquilizing drugs that can be used to control behavioral problems, that's all it does. And sometimes the antipsychotic, the sedative, and the tranquilizing drugs actually adds to their intellectual disability. As sad as that is. All we can do is control their behavior. And sometimes the medication that we give them to control their behavior is actually making them less intellectually stimulated. Data on the effectiveness of various drug therapies at best only offer weak support. Nonetheless, use of medications to control challenging behavior in those with intellectual disability remains common. The sad thing is that we would rather control your behavior so that you don't interrupt my world than allow you to have a proper intellectual capacity, as sad as that is. In other words, if you have disruptive behavior, I'm going to give you a pill. I don't care how stupid it makes you, as long as you don't bother me. That's the way it works. As sad as that may seem. So we care more about ourselves than we care about the kids. Specific learning disorders combines the DSM-4 diagnoses of reading disorder, mathematics disorder, disorder of written expression, and learning disorder not otherwise specified. Diagnosis requires difficulties in learning and academic skills involving reading, spelling, writing, or mathematics in which measured abilities are below what would be expected by the student's chronological age. Together, specific learning disorders may affect 5% to 15% of the population. And for this reason, if you went to school, I'm sure you all went to school, you know some individuals that have these problems. The probability of going to school and not seeing somebody with these problems is fairly remote. If it's between 5 and 15% of the population. The difficulties that lead to this diagnosis cannot be due to intellectual disability, and they must have persisted for 6 months or more in spite of attempts to remediate them. The diagnosis includes the specifiers for the areas of impairment, with impairment in reading, with impairment in written expression, with impairment in mathematics. Severity is annotated as mild, moderate, or severe. So we are looking at their ability to read, their ability to write, and their ability to do mathematics. Reading, writing, and arithmetic. Right? The 3 R's. Even though it's not really. Only an idiot would call it the 3 R's. Arithmetic. Writing with an R instead of a W. Okay. Reading difficulties may involve errors in comprehension, slow reading and oral substitutions, distortions, or omissions. I have a confession to make. I know, another confession. My confession is that the first academic job I had was as an English teacher. So when I grade your papers, I can't not grade it as an English teacher. I apologize. But I only take 20 points off for grammar. So as long as you can write, you're probably okay. But I'm sorry. Most other psychologists are not English teachers, but I am. Okay. So if you have a grammatical error in your paper, I will find it. And I will correct it. I can't not. That's the problem. It's almost like I'm obsessed with grammar.
OCD.
So when you get your paper back, and even if you use a word that I didn't think you should have used, some words don't fit, okay? And then I'll correct that. But sometimes if you've said, you used a word at the beginning of a sentence and I didn't think it fit, I'll take it out. I'll just take it out. And sometimes I'll just chop your paper all to pieces. But I only count off 20 points for grammar. So as long as you write okay, you're probably all right. I do have a problem with grading papers. That's one of the reasons why I read somebody's paper over the weekend. I swear she doesn't speak English. The words were all English words, but they didn't go together at all. So I struggled with that one. It took me 6 hours to grade the paper. I was telling Edison about it last week. Unfortunately, she's in 2 of my classes. So I read her paper in one of my classes, and then I read her second paper right after that. It took me like 24 hours to grade 2 papers. It was horrible. And I would like to have not done it, you know, I would like to have just skipped over all that stuff. But I can't, I'm an English teacher. So, some people have dyslexia, some people have reading and writing difficulties. I have the opposite, it's like I have to correct everything. And if you turn your paper in late, okay, so you give me like 2 days to read your paper, I will still do that. I cannot read your paper without doing that. I have to not read your paper in order to do that, okay? If I start reading it, I have to correct it. I can't stop myself. I was an English teacher. It's the first thing I was an English teacher. All right, that's my confession. I'm done. So I have the opposite. I have the opposite of dyslexia, I guess. Reading difficulties may involve errors, comprehension, slow reading, and oral substitutions, distortion, or omissions. The condition, and people will leave words out. So proofread your stuff. All you have to do is read over it one time. Okay? Take out all those double V's. The. How many times can you say the? Okay. Make sure your prepositions match your verbs, all right? There are certain prepositions that fit words and certain prepositions that don't. Okay. The condition has also been called dyslexia. Of course, that's reading difficulties. As many as 80% are males, unfortunately, and I'm not one of them. Although this may be biased, as boys are more likely to show disruptive behavior along with reading dysfunction, and thus they attract diagnostic attention, whereas little girls just pretend that they don't have a problem, and nobody cares. As long as they're quiet, nobody cares. This is what our educational system has become. If you shut up, then you'll probably get away with it. If you make noise or become disruptive, then you're not going to get away with it. That's the problem we have in our academic system. Mathematical difficulties can include the linguistic, perceptual, attentional, and computational skills involved in mathematic achievement. My son teaches mathematics at a high school, and he's really very good. This kid has never taught before. What did he do before he became a teacher? He was a bartender. So, what does that have to do with mathematics? It doesn't have anything to do with mathematics, but he has the ability to understand why people don't understand. The first year he taught, he was put up for the Golden Apple Award, an outstanding teacher, and he didn't even have a teaching license. And here he was put up for a Golden Teacher Award. He went to another school and he started teaching, and he's teaching the other mathematics teachers how to teach. I know. So why is he doing that? Is anybody an education major in here? What happens, people become teachers, they take education classes, and then they become teachers. But they don't have any special skills in any subject area. So they don't really study mathematics or English or whatever. They just know how to teach, but they don't know their subject. So that's what he's doing. He's a math major, of course, so he's much better at it than they are. Whoops. Anyway, so he's a really good math teacher. Disorder, I can't even add and subtract. He doesn't even have numbers. He's just got all these letters, X's and Y's and A's and B's. What a goofball. It's not math. Math has to have numbers, right? Disorder of written expression is characterized by deficient writing skills, often including combinations of poor handwriting, poor grammar, and punctuation, common spelling errors, and poor organization of paragraphs or sentences. And I don't really mind the handwriting. The poor grammar I do. The punctuation is a little interesting. Don't just keep putting in commas. Eventually you're going to have to put in a period. There we go. Okay. I don't know what they taught you downstairs in their English classes, but you're not Faulkner. I'd rather that you wrote like Hemingway. Short sentences, no run-on sentences. Faulkner, run-on sentences. Drives me crazy. What are we doing here? Okay, it can be associated with perceptual, motor, or language deficits. You can tell what I did all weekend. I graded papers all weekend. DSM-5 defines specific learning disorders as having a biological origin causing a dysfunction in the brain without being specific. Prematurity, low birth weight, and prenatal exposure to nicotine are listed as risk factors. So just smoking cigarettes, which are legal. You can smoke all the cigarettes you want, but you shouldn't do it while you're pregnant. Specific learning disorders, especially involving reading and math, tend to run in families. And we do see this running in families. So my niece, the one that was shooting up with heroin, she had her picture taken with her gut out to, she's like 8.5 months pregnant with a cigarette. With a cigarette. She had a picture taken. That is her pregnancy picture. Is the one with her with a cigarette in her fingers. Idiot. When learning disorders are comorbid with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD outcomes tend to be poorer. Significant correlations between the specific learning disorders may suggest they interrelate at a more basic level. And of course, the biggest problem, and this is the reason why we see more boys with learning disorders, it's because they have ADHD and they're more likely to be diagnosed because they make more noise. And what do teachers want? They want a quiet classroom. That's what they want. And as long as it's a quiet classroom, then they're okay. If they've got a disruptive person in the back of the room, they just sit looking at me. No, he's not even looking at me. I'm looking at his glasses. If they have a disruptive person in the back of the room, of course, then they try to get that kid out of class. How are they going to do it? They're going to say he's got a learning disability and or disorder, and they're going to treat him for that. And maybe he'll have to go to reading class and not be in their class to disrupt. Maybe she can just have all those little girls in there who don't make any noise. Symptoms may persist in adulthood for up to about 4% of the population will continue having learning disorder. Motor disorders are conditions in which a deficit in motor coordination or delay in meeting motor development milestones interferes with academic or daily life. These will include developmental coordination disorders, stereotypic movement disorder, and tic disorders. And I've got some people with tics, so don't get excited. Well, maybe you can get excited if you want. Motor disorders involves a deficit in motor coordination or delay in meeting motor development milestones, interfering with academic or daily life. Motor disorders are diagnosed with clumsiness, when clumsiness is not due to a physical disability such as cerebral palsy or muscular dystrophy, nor is it characteristic of the motor difficulties associated with intellectual disability. So these have to be motor problems, walking, running into things, dropping things. These are the motor disorders we're talking about. Clumsy. The individual seems to be clumsy, clumsier than normal. And it isn't a problem with their intellectual disability, muscular dystrophy, or cerebral palsy. For diagnosis to qualify, motor deficiencies must be severe enough to interfere with normal activities of daily living. The DSM-5 reports a prevalence between 5% and 6% of children between the ages of 5 and 11 years. In some cases, it will persist into adulthood. And these people are the ones that will never be athletes. They may want to be athletes, but they will never be athletes because they have a motor disorder. In stereotypic movement disorder, the key feature is motor behavior that is non-functional and repetitive. I don't know, I hope you've never seen people like this, but sometimes they cannot not wave their hands. Sometimes it's body rocking back and forth. It's usually front to back. It's never side to side. It's always front to back. Hand waving or shaking, eye poking, head banging, face slapping, or self biting. These are damaging, and these are relatively rare. But when you have somebody with who is a head banger, that didn't sound right. If somebody that bangs their head, these individuals can actually do damage to themselves, and this is really kind of a problem. A self-biter will have bruises all over their bodies. Usually it's their arms, their forearms. Risk factors may include social isolation or environmental stress, and that's the reason they're having these problems. The body rocking and the hand waving are fairly common. The rest of it is not all that common. Some neurogenetic conditions such as Rett syndrome also contribute to stereotypic movement disorder. Rett syndrome is really kind of interesting. Almost all the problems that we talk about, little boys have more than little girls. Rett syndrome is exclusively female. Rett syndrome is where the individual is born with an undersized head. The head doesn't grow normally, and the individual will have problems with movement. And the movements that they have is usually hand wringing, as odd as that seems. And so they will sit there and they will wring their hands until they wear all the skin off their hands. I mean, this is really kind of an interesting situation. The other thing is that they will wave their hands like that little girl was doing. She doesn't have